A long time ago, in Araka, a village surrounded by hills and rivers, in the early hours of the morning, the villagers were buzzing with excitement because it was the day of the most anticipated wedding that would bring peace between the villages of Amans and Araka. Namdi, the prince of Amans, would be getting married to Adaugo, the princess of Araka, and their union would seize the war that had spanned for hundreds of generations. The air was thick with excitement, and all over the village, there were conversations of peace. Sadly, what they did not know was that by evening, most of them would either end up as slaves and the others dead because their princess was miles away from Araka with her lover, Obinna. In the afternoon of the wedding day, the celebrations were now in full gear, and it was time for the people of Amans to behold their new wife. Adaugo's father, King Chika, asked her mother to go and usher their daughter in. But when she got to Adaugo's hut, she met two palace maids crying. My queen, the older maid said, "It's the princess, she's nowhere to be found." The queen was horrified. She knew her daughter did not want to marry Namdi, but she thought the heart-to-heart conversation they had in the evening of the previous day made Adaugo understand the importance of the marriage. When did you notice she was missing? The queen asked the maid. Yesterday night, my queen. She went to see her final farewell to Obinna as agreed, and since then, she has not returned. With all the confusion that was going on, the queen was certain about one thing: war. Their kingdom was in trouble. So, she asked the maids to tell some warriors to take the king to safety. But this turned out to be a mistake, because King Dozi of Amans was a cunning man. He never wanted peace between Araka and Amans. The only reason he allowed the marriage to happen was to form an alliance with Araka, a land rich with loamy soil, that only had the best crops growing from the ground. And King Chika accepted the idea because he was tired of the senseless killings. You see, when the year started, the priest of Amans prophesied a terrible famine that would plague the land. When King Dozi heard the prophecy, he knew it was time to seek help from another village to help them stock up their barns so his people would not die during the prophesied famine. But because of his cunning ways, he sent spies to Araka many months before the wedding to get familiar with the village, just in case King Chika decided to play a fast one on them. On the wedding day, his warriors stood at strategic places, waiting for his signal. So, when he noticed Araka warriors trying to usher their king away, he panicked and gave a signal. An arrow was shot straight at King Chika's heart. The whole place was in chaos. The people of Araka tried to defend themselves, but they were up against warriors who had planned their attack on them for many months. Naturally, they lost. The Amans warriors slaughtered every member of the royal family and prominent chiefs, and as for the commoners, King Dozi put rulers over them, subjecting them to slavery in their own land. Far away from the chaos were Obinna and Adaugo, holding each other in joy. They had finally arrived at Osi, the village they had been planning to escape to for months, where no one would bother their love for each other. As Adaugo and Obinna set foot in the village, Obinna asked a question that had been burning in his heart since the moment they set off for their journey. My love, I hope you took enough gold from your father to help us live a comfortable life. Adaugo's heart stopped for a brief second. She knew she could not run away from answering the question, so she said, Obim, I have been meaning to tell you. I could not collect the gold. They almost caught me, and I would not have been able to make my way to you. Obinna instantly pushed her away from their tight embrace. What do you mean? How can you be so stupid? He said very harshly, with a mean look on his face. Immediately after saying that, he realized he should not have spoken that way, but the damage was done. That was enough for Adaugo to finally realize and accept what had been staring her in the face for a long time. She did not need anyone to tell her that she had abandoned her family, traveled across rivers, run through thick forests, and slept in uncomfortable places for the wrong man, a man who only loved her for her status. Days went by, and Adaugo and Obinna began settling into their new reality. They found an abandoned hut and decided to start living there, but they could barely afford to feed themselves, and Obinna wasn't making it any easier for her. At every opportunity, he blamed her for their situation. One day, Adaugo suggested, "Obim, let's go out to the village square and find some jobs to do, or are we going to starve to death?" But Obinna laughed at her in the face and said, "What does a princess, who has been cared for her whole life, know how to do?" Obinna was getting angry again. For as long as he could remember, he was a blacksmith. The gold Adaugo left behind was meant to retire him for life. Well, Adaugo decided to take matters into her own hands. She went to the village square to look for a menial job. Despite her royal status, she was determined to make ends meet. When she got to the market, the first thing she noticed was the vast collection of African artworks sold in the market. She suddenly remembered all the paintings she saw on the mud houses on her way to the market. It was obvious that the village of Osi took their art very seriously. Adaugo immediately felt his sense of welcome, because she herself was a wonderful sculptor. She could carve the most beautiful objects from nothing, and her painting techniques were immaculate. As a matter of fact, most of the objects in her father's palace were made by her. She quickly decided to sell her beads to get some money to buy supplies for her art. Day by day, she began to carve her structures, finishing them with a generous amount of paint. On the day she set out to sell the objects in the market, she felt a sharp pain in her belly. She quickly asked Obinna to get help from the herbalist. After examining her, the herbalist confirmed that she was pregnant. Obinna was disappointed. How were they going to raise a child without money? He decided to abandon Adaugo and flee to another village. So, as Adaugo rested, Obinna made his way out of the house. But just as he was about to leave, he spotted the sculptures Adaugo had made. He thought to himself, "I can sell these to get a little money for food." But he was wrong. There was no way he would get just a little money from them. Adaugo knew her craft well. She was African royalty, so she had an eye for only the best things. Obinna had not gone far when he was stopped by a man who wanted to buy all the art he had. Not only was he willing to buy everything, but he was also offering plenty of bags of cowries in exchange. "I need more of this. I have never seen anything like this in Osi. You will definitely be one of the richest men in Osi if you keep selling these types of objects." After that conversation, Obinna decided he would not leave anymore. So, he went back home to Adaugo and shared the news with her. Adaugo was excited. She knew her art was special and would make her a lot of money, but she did not expect it to happen so quickly. "So," she said, "but Obim, you didn't tell me you were going to help me sell them." Obinna could not tell her that he had been making his way out of the village when he met the man who bought the sculptures. So, he told her, "I didn't want to bother you because you were resting. I can't wait to show him the different types of objects I can make," Adaugo said, but Obinna stopped her right there. "The man believes I am the sculptor. We might seem dishonest if we go back and say you are the one." Obinna was able to convince her that he was better off posing as the sculptor while she worked behind the scenes. Although Adaugo knew it was the wrong thing to do, she was secretly joyful to see Obinna happy again. It reminded her of the wonderful times they had in Araka. Maybe, just maybe, they could live happily, she thought to herself. But 21 years later, the only good thing about Obinna and Adaugo's union was their daughter, Chioma. However, just like the sculptor buyer predicted, they were one of the richest families in Osi due to Adaugo's sculptures. But their marriage was unbearable for both of them. Obinna constantly cheated on his wife and disrespected her at every opportunity. In no time, she had turned into a bitter person. When she wasn't sculpting, she was nagging him. One day, she decided she had had enough. If she wanted to live long enough to see her daughter's children, she knew she had to leave Obinna. So she said to him, "I'm going back to Araka. My parents may not be alive, but at least my siblings will receive me with love." Obinna let out a loud laugh. "Do you think I haven't thought about that? Well, 2 weeks after we arrived in Osi, I heard from some men in the market that there was a mass slaughter in Araka because a certain princess ran away with her lover." Adaugo looked Obinna straight in the eyes, and she knew he was not telling lies. For many years she had longed to see her family again, but now it was no longer a possibility. Her world was shattered. She walked straight to her room, lay down on her bed, and cried herself to sleep. Later that evening, her daughter Chioma went to wake her up from her nap. Mama, wake up, your food is ready." When Chima realized she was not responding to her, she decided to tap her, but then she noticed how stiff her mother's body was. Immediately, she let out a loud scream. Chioma's screams had alerted her father, and he ran to confirm what she already knew: her mother had passed away. Adaugo had died of a broken heart. The next few days were quite depressing. Chioma had never seen her father in such a state before. She had always thought her parents did not love each other due to their frequent quarrels, but seeing him so sad changed her entire opinion. Obinna refused to sleep, eat, drink, or even leave his hut for days, and Chioma was beginning to get very worried. Several times she would try to get him to eat something, but he always refused. So one day she cooked his favorite meal and went to give him in his hut. "Papa, I made egusi soup and pounded yam for you," she said to him. Obinna cracked a smile and took the food from his daughter. But just before he finished the food, he set it aside and began crying. "Destroy all these sculptures. They remind me of my late wife. I don't care if they arrest me. I don't care anymore." Chioma was quite confused. What did her father mean by, "I don't care if they arrest me"? She kept asking him what he meant, and finally, Obinna opened up to her. Before Adaugo died, they had been contracted to furnish the king's palace of a neighboring village, but Adaugo had only completed half of the sculptures. She died, leaving the job unfinished. And since Obinna was posing as the sculptor, he had no explanation to give on why the project couldn't be completed. "Papa," Chioma said, "you know I sculpt very well too. I can easily finish it." Obinna looked at his child with gratitude and said, "This is the last job we will do. I am tired of posing as the sculptor." He told her that the pay from the job was more than enough to retire them, and Chioma would never have to work a day in her life again. Chioma began working immediately. She had already lost one parent, and she wasn't willing to lose her father as well, and she wasn't willing to lose another. Although she wasn't naturally gifted as an artist, watching her mother over the past years had helped her learn to create sculptures just like her. Weeks passed, and Chioma finally finished the sculptures for the king's palace. Her father gathered them to take them out for delivery. "I'll be back tomorrow morning," he said to his daughter before leaving. But that was a lie. Obinna did not come back the next day or even 3 days after. Chioma was very worried. Several times, she would run outside to check if her father was back, but she was disappointed every time. One morning, she decided to journey to the village where her father was meant to deliver the sculptures. While she was getting ready, she heard the sound of drums getting closer and closer to her house. When she was sure the noise was in her compound, she went out to check, and lo and behold, it was her father standing with a group of people. "My daughter," he shouted. Come and greet your father's new wife." Chioma looked at the woman, but something else caught her attention. She was also holding a little boy, and it was as if the woman knew that Chioma was looking at the boy. So she said, "He's your brother. Come and greet him." Chioma was confused. She waited for the crowd to leave and then pulled her father to the side for a conversation. "A new wife? Mama died just 3 months ago." Obinna looked at her and said, "My child, your father is happy. Don't spoil this for me," he told her. Meanwhile, the king loved the sculptures. "You need to make more so we can sell them in the marketplace." Chioma was upset. She finally understood her father was heartless. But what he did not know was that his child was not a weakling. She would not be bullied by anyone, not even him father. She decided to take a long stroll to think of her next move. For more than an hour, she kept on walking until she arrived at the seaport. "One chance to Umuzuo. One chance to Umuzuo," the boatmaster called out. He came close to Chioma and asked, "Are you going?" Although she had no plans to travel, she began considering the idea because her best friend had moved to Umuzuo a year ago. "I'll go and stay with her for a while to clear my head," she thought to herself. But just as she was about to pay, an old woman interrupted her conversation with the boatmaster. "My child, please can I take your seat? I need to be at Umuzuo tomorrow for my sister's burial." Chioma felt pity for her and decided to let her go on the boat. "When is the next one to Umuzuo?" she asked the boatmaster. "Next week," he answered. "The boat leaves once a week." But then he pointed at another boat. "That one is going to Araka. If you join that one, you can get another boat that will take you to Umuzuo." So Chioma did as the man instructed and paid her fee to Araka. Hours later, when the boat sailed away, she knew in her heart that leaving her father was the best decision. After a day, they arrived in Araka, and Chioma stepped out of the boat and began looking for the next one to Umuzuo. However, she discovered the boat would not be leaving that same day but the following day. So, she took a walk into the village to find a place to rest her head on her. Along the way, she walked past a man who was staring at her. Suddenly, she stopped and asked, "Do I know you? Why do you keep staring at me?" The man apologized and went on his way. About 20 minutes later, she met another woman who froze when she saw her. "Adaugo," the woman shouted. Chioma was shocked to hear someone call her mother's name. "How do you know my mother?" Chioma queried. Luckily, the woman's hut was close to where they stood, so she dragged Chioma inside. When the woman found out that Chioma was truly related to Adaugo, she said to her, "You look so much like your mother. I was her hairdresser." The more she told Chioma about her mother, the more confused she was. Chioma did not know her mother was royalty or that she fled from Araka with her father. All her life, she thought she was from Osi. The woman, who was called Ndidi, asked her to stay for a while, and Chioma accepted because, strangely, she felt at home in Araka. Days passed, and Chioma heard more stories from Ndidi, and she also began to bond with her son, Tobchukwu. Later at night, when people couldn't recognize Chioma, they would take long walks and bond over the simplest things. In a matter of time, they had already developed feelings for each other. One day, Chioma said to Tob, "I want my people to be free from slavery." Tob was silent. He knew it was only a matter of time before she brought it up. "The king who enslaved us is dead," she continued. "His son Ndidi died in battle, and I've heard that the new king is very kind," she said to him. Chioma was right. King Ndidi's son, Fini, was a kind man. "I don't think he's kind enough to give Araka away without a fight," Tob answered. After he said that, they walked back home in silence, but Chioma was not satisfied. So she went to ask Ndidi for her opinion. Ndidi was very glad Chioma wanted freedom for her people because Chioma was their only hope. In Araka, they had a rule that only a person of royal blood could ascend the throne, which was why King Dozi made sure to kill all members of the royal family to keep them as slaves permanently. So, against Tobe's advice, they began to plan for their freedom. Ndidi alerted some respected people in their community, and they held meetings to find the best way forward. Chioma did not want a war. She had a different plan. Over the next 6 months, she would carve sculptures to gift the king of Araka, and every Araka indigene would be required to bring yams from their barns to gift the king. They were going to appeal to the conscience of the king. Tobe thought it was a stupid idea, but Chioma was determined, even if it meant that she might get killed. Once the 6 months elapsed, they were ready to make their presentation to the king. But the night before the presentation, Tobe took Chioma to a corner. "Let's leave Araka. They will kill all of us tomorrow if we make this move." Chioma was quite disappointed that Tobe would say that. She tried to convince him otherwise, but he wasn't having it. So that night, he left Chioma and his mother behind and fled to another village. The day of the presentation came, and the people of Araka marched to the king's palace. The elderly ones held hands, and the younger ones carried the gifts. But when they got there, Chioma recognized the man they called their king. It was the man who had stared at her the first time she came into Araka. That day, he had gone unescorted to visit some widows in the village. The Araka indigenes presented their gifts, and Chioma began to speak for her people. When she was done speaking, King Ifani was silent for a while. Then he spoke. "I would like to apologize for my grandfather's mistake. To make up for what he did, I am setting all of you free today." The people cheered in excitement. Although King Ifani never maltreated them, they were happy to not be called slaves anymore in their own land. Days later, King Ifani still couldn't get Chioma off his mind. He had not been able to get her off his mind since the first day he saw her. He also tried several times to locate her, but he couldn't. Ifani was attracted to Chioma, so he decided to visit her to tell her that he wanted her as his bride. When he told her about his feelings, he also suggested something else. "Let's merge our villages," he said. "We will give it a new name and grow in strength and unity together." Chioma asked him to give her time to think of his offer. She consulted her people, and King Ifani did the same thing too, and their people accepted the idea. After all, King Ifani had been kind to them. Even when the Araka people lived as slaves, they were getting married to people from Amans. So it was official. Ifani and Chioma got married, and a new village was formed, called Udu, which means peace. So what should have happened between Ndidi and Adaugo years ago finally found its way to occur in the lives of Ifani and Chioma.